Authorization can happen at many different points in time and at many different levels of the application architecture. One of the first points where authorization really gets involved is what's referred to as admin time authorization. And this is really during the account setup and creation by, say, a system administrator, where a user account is generated inside of an IAM or an IDP, and they're put into a directory group, or they're put into a particular access organization, or they have a particular policy applied to them. This is where an administrator is defining a user and giving them some sort of assignment, and that assignment later on means they're allowed access down to a downstream application. Crucially, admin time administration doesn't actually involve a user logging in, it doesn't involve a user accessing an application. It's purely the account setup process, the sort of joiner, movers, leavers type process, where you go and create an identity and you give that person particular rights, and those rights might grant access to different sorts of systems. So someone in the HR department is allowed to access the HR system. Someone in the finance department is allowed to access the finance system. And this can really be thought of almost as like role-based access control, because you're essentially granting someone a membership, or you're assigning that person to a group, and that essentially is giving them a role or giving them access to a system. When they come to actually log in and authenticate, there's another process that occurs which makes sure the user says who they are, and they issue them a token which may contain those assignments. And then there's runtime authorization, which is as a user is actually interacting, having logged into the application and trying to do actions, where you try and make decisions based upon what is going on inside of the application at that moment in time, with the context of the request and the user and the network they're on and these kind of things. So admin time authorization is great for the kind of first setup and the most coarse-grained level of authorization. Does the account exist and what groups they belong to? It's great from a compliance perspective because it's very clear what is going on and what groups they belong to, and it's very easier for an auditor to come in and check the associations and do a access review and really follow some of those best practices, separation of duties, least privilege access type models. But it's really ultimately at the user creation and management layer, not down at the application layer. Regulated industries will heavily use this because you can put users in group based on departments or teams or organizations or reporting lines or cost centers to really delineate your users and put them in the right place. And then if you look at maybe a SaaS application or an off-the-shelf product that you're using, typical model is you'll have a admin user created in that, and then they can go and administer the users within that application. And again, you're granting the users, you're administering that access inside of it and assigning user a role or a group inside of an application. So there's another level where admin time authorization can happen. However, this is a model, it does have its limitations. You can't take into context anything about the session or the actual actions inside of the application. It's purely a binary, is this person in the access group or not? You can't take into context of when they logged in, did they use a step-up authentication occur? Or when they're making a particular action, they're trying to do a particular action on a particular resource inside of the system. Can that user do that action based on that context? These are much more fine-grained authentication and runtime authorization. But admin time authorization is really a key part of the process to have some sanity and structure in how your authorization model works, and is really where the start of authorization really begins in the whole process, at defining those ownerships and those assignments right at the beginning inside of your identity access management solution, to then be used downstream in much more finer grained approaches to authorization models inside of your different application layers.